nurturing brands. Nurturing brands in this series, I want to start to look at the issue of nurturing brands. Now, may I be a demon? What is a brand? Who wants to make some view about what is a brand?
Something that's intangible.
Something that is
intangible.
Intangible.
Emotional feelings, perceptions, attitudes.
Oh, lovely, lovely. It's something that's intangible. It's something that relates to emotion. So it's about feel. Yeah, it's about feel. Is a brand also about think?
I often talk about a brand being an idea or a promise.
A brand's an idea, a brand is a promise, but is it something that's about think? Do people think about brands? I mean, clearly people feel about brands. You know, is a brand about think as well? When people decide between brands, do they think as well as feel?
I suppose it depends on the sector. In business to business, it's probably more think. I mean, last time we had this conversation, I thought that a brand was the word made flesh. In other words, it's the realization of the promise. So the actual fulfillment of the delivery is very tangible. So I think brand is about fulfillment as much as it is about logo.
Lovely, lovely. We've got some fantastic comments coming through so far. We've got some fantastic comments coming through in terms of what's going on. We've got comments that relate to brands being intangible and tangible. As you so nicely said, you know, what is a brand? Maybe the brand is the manifestation, the physical manifestation of a promise. A brand is both think and it's also feel. A brand is something that in the business-to-business sector, sure, it's based upon think, but let's debunk a myth. In the business-to-business sector, feel does play a part. Feel does play a part. There was a wonderful campaign that IBM ran a little time ago, and the campaign showed a photograph of a manager, and the caption just said, "What you really want is a good night's sleep." There's an organisation that develops fantastic systems. There's an organisation that significantly helps productivity. And one could argue, therefore, that the decision to buy comes about primarily because it's about think. If you ignore the importance of relationship, if you ignore the way that people want to feel comfortable working with other people, you're going to miss a point. But it's lovely. We got tangible. We got intangible. We've also been hearing words coming through like perception. You know, and brands are, at the end of the day, entities that are somewhere in our mind. We perceive something about them, but they're also about emotion. It's also about a feel that we have, the feel that we have coming through. So, lovely concepts, lovely words that came through from you. If I may try to pull it together a bit, inspired a few years ago by one of Hugh Davidson's books, Even More Offensive Marketing, introduces the idea of a metaphor and uses the metaphor of an iceberg, which I thought was really neat. And I'm going to take that and I'm going to do something else with it. You know, what is a brand? A brand is a basis for recognizing what another party is going to do for you. Now, talk to many people about what a brand is, and they'll give you playback. They'll give you playback, and they'll talk to you about things like symbols, names, packaging, and advertising. And that is not unusual, because to use the words that you've been using, it's the flesh on the promise. It's the basis by which we can start to infer something about what the offer may be like. You know, the most basic thing, you start to think about going inside an aircraft. If the inside of an aircraft is white, people then say white is all maybe about purity, because they've been taking care and consideration about making sure that the inside is clean. Therefore, the inference is the engines have had the same level of care and consideration, and this is good news. So the way that we manifest a promise is important, and we see this thing coming through here. You know, particularly in the services sector, where you're making a promise about an intangible anyway. You've got to tangibilize these matters. But the nice thing about this iceberg is it gets a point over. And really, the symbol, the name, the packaging, the design, that's the tip of the iceberg. That is not the powerhouse of the brand. That is the tip of the iceberg. It's not the powerhouse of the brand. That's the bit by which I recognize what is going on. But I recognize what is going on because of the bit under the water. That is where the power comes through. Ladies and gentlemen, if you've got any doubts, the ship is called SS Titanic. And yes, it did sink. And sadly, tragically, it sank because, in the case of an iceberg, 15% is visible, 85% is invisible. It was that power that was unseen that was the downfall of that ship. Let's then start to think a bit about the invisible part of the brand, because this is where our powerhouse comes about. A brand, to my mind, is a two-component entity, to start off with. It is a two-component entity, and that's why I started off with think and feel. That's why it was lovely that we got these comments that were coming through in terms of perception, comments that were coming through in terms of intangible, and then trying to tangibilize. Let's start to think about it. What is a brand? First and foremost, a brand is something that delivers functionally something for you. It delivers something functionally for you because inside the organization has knowledge and skills. It therefore has competencies. You start to look at organizations. Sony is about innovation. Organizations have competencies. They're very, very good at doing certain things. Honda, its competence is all about small motors. It really understands small motors, and by golly gosh, does it then keep on developing its expertise and its knowledge about small motors. Now that's the bit inside the organization, the core competence. So when I'm developing something that says, I'm going to do something for you, I do it because I've got knowledge and I've got skills. But that's internal. So the core competence is internal. Now I then got to take that and I've got to translate that into an external environment. And the way I do that is I then position the brand. I position the brand, so now what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get the brand to register in the brain. BMW goes faster. Volvo, by contrast, goes safer at the most basic level. I apologize, I'm possibly not giving those two wonderful brands the full domain they should be given. But it's very simple indeed. I go inside the organization, I then take it outside. So I said the base start point for a brand really is it's a two-component entity. There's my first component. My first component is all about a brand being a cluster of functional values. These functional values come about because of what I'm doing inside the organization and the way that I then take that externally so people register that in terms of their mind. And coming back to the points that were made earlier on, my big challenge now is perception. How do I now try and break through the brain so I register? Well, very simple. I do it because if I position the brand so it's instantly understandable what it does, in theory I'm able to get through to it. So the brand starts out as being a cluster of functional values. Why don't we stay at the level of functionalism in brands? You know, why don't we stay at the level of functionalism in brands?
Because it's the emotion that gives you the energy.
It's the emotion that can drive things forward. It's the emotion that gives you energy. And it's the emotion, well done. And it's also the emotion that then gives you a basis for really saying, do I feel comfortable with this? It's the emotion that gives you ultimately the sustainability. Because you see, you can patent, you can talk to the intellectual property right people, you can patent the idea you've got. The problem is eventually you'll come off patent. The patent can be understood. You can also encourage organizations to then leapfrog the technology and develop not a variant, but actually the next generation. The bit that's much more difficult to copy is emotion, feeling. So we've got to start off in terms of delivering something. And we do that through functionalism. So brand is a cluster, first of all, of functional values. Then we put something in. It's a cluster of functional and emotional values. Now, how does the emotion come about? Well, again, use the same logic as I did in the first part there. And the logic is go inside the organization. How do I start to develop some form of feel about the brand? Well, one way of doing it is through my staff. It's the importance of people, and it's those people that are doing things in a certain type of way. You therefore get organizational culture. Organizational culture leads to a certain type of behavior. Ladies and gentlemen, I've got great respect for two airlines, British Airways and Thai International. Both very safe. One of the discriminators between the airlines, though, is just being greeted on the aircraft. You know, British Airways, again, because of the culture, there's safety coming through, but also, you know, something about the organisation. You know, semiotically, the bodies are, you know, sort of quite straight. Very British welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, coming through from it. And you sense a master-servant type of relationship occurring. By contrast, you get onto a Thai International flight, and very polite, very respectful greeting comes onto the aircraft. Shwari Kwab. You know, one is about serenity. They're both very, very safe airlines, but you know that you're going to have a different type of interaction. So what's going on is these pilots that have been trained, these cabin crew that are very, very good at their jobs, the aircrafts they're flying, they're all very, very good. These are the, you know, the competencies and the functional delivery from it. But some people start to choose the airline, not because of think, but also because of think interacting with feel. So we start to see this culture. What then happens is, people then start to decode brands. I've gone inside the organisation, I then go outside the organisation. And this time what then starts to happen is people start to feel something about a brand. And they feel it through the idea of the metaphor of personality. When the brand to come to life, you know, what sort of person will this brand then start to be? So we start to see now a basis for decoding brands using a two-component model. What is a brand? A brand is a cluster of functional and emotional values. The functional values come about because we look inside, then we take it outside. The emotional values, we again look inside, we take it outside. Design, communication, these are very, very helpful devices, very, very helpful tools that help us to move on. But what we're really saying is, at the end of the day, when we're building brand, we're very much concerned with getting those two components right. Those two components right, because then what we want to do is take that two-component model and then say, so brand is a cluster of functional and emotional values, going back to your point, the point we made earlier on, that enable us to make a promise. It's a promise about a unique and a welcomed experience. So brand is a cluster of functional and emotional values that enables us to make a promise about a unique and a welcomed experience.